"You paid for me, now do it," the rancher obeyed. And then he had a wife. The ranch sat far from the noise of town, surrounded by wide fields and slow-moving wind. It was the kind of place where mornings began before sunrise and nights ended only when the body finally gave in to rest. The man who owned it lived a quiet, disciplined life. People knew him as a rancher who worked harder than anyone else and spoke less than most. He did not chase attention, and he did not invite trouble. His days were filled with animals, land, and responsibility, and his nights were filled with silence. He had chosen this life after many losses. Years earlier, he had learned that promises mattered more than comfort. When he gave his word, he kept it. When he helped someone, he did so fully or not at all. That belief guided him even when it cost him more than he expected. One afternoon, a call reached him while he was repairing a broken fence. The voice on the other end was strained, desperate, and shaking. It belonged to an old acquaintance from town, someone he had helped once before. The message was simple but heavy. There was a woman in trouble. Debt had cornered her. Her options were few, and none of them were safe. The family asked for help they could not repay in any normal way. The rancher listened without interrupting. He did not ask questions right away. When the call ended, he stood still, staring across the field as the wind moved the grass like waves. He knew this kind of situation. He also knew how easily people could be hurt when money and power mixed with fear. By evening, he drove into town. He met the family in a small, worn living room where worry sat heavier than furniture. That was where he saw her for the first time. She stood near the window, arms crossed, eyes sharp but tired. She did not look weak, but she looked trapped. Life had backed her into a corner, and she knew it. The conversation was uncomfortable. Numbers were mentioned. Deadlines were explained. Consequences were hinted at but never said aloud. Finally, the room fell silent. Everyone looked at the rancher, waiting for his answer. He agreed to help, not because he felt powerful and not because he wanted control, but because walking away would mean leaving her to something worse. He made his terms clear. He would cover the debt. She would come to the ranch for a time. There would be rules. There would be respect. Nothing would be forced. He believed that saying these things mattered. She looked at him then, really looked at him. Her voice was steady, but there was anger beneath it when she spoke. She said words that sounded like surrender, but they were edged with bitterness, as if she were testing him, daring him to prove her wrong. The room went quiet again. The rancher did not respond right away. He only nodded once. In his mind, the agreement was not ownership. It was protection, but he knew how it could look. He knew how easily lines could blur. That night he barely slept. A few days later, she arrived at the ranch with one small bag. The sky was gray and the air felt heavy. He showed her the guest room, simple and clean. He explained the routines of the ranch and where she was free to go. He told her she was not a prisoner. His words were calm, but he could tell she did not believe them yet. She kept her distance. She spoke little. She watched everything. At meals, she sat stiffly, as if waiting for something bad to happen. He noticed how she flinched at raised voices, even when the voices were far away and harmless. He noticed how she worked harder than necessary, as if trying to earn something that had already been given. The rancher struggled with his own thoughts. He questioned himself every night. Had he done the right thing? Was he helping, or had he simply stepped into a role that should never exist? He reminded himself of his rules. He reminded himself of his promise. Days turned into weeks. The ranch had a way of slowing time. The land did not care about past mistakes or future fears. It only asked for effort. Slowly, she began to change. Not dramatically, but in small ways. Her shoulders relaxed. Her eyes softened when she laughed at something unexpected. She began to speak more, asking questions about the animals, about the land, about his life. He answered honestly but briefly. He did not share more than necessary. He feared that closeness might confuse things. Still, something shifted between them, subtle but real. Trust once broken rebuilds quietly. One evening a storm rolled in suddenly. Rain hammered the roof and thunder shook the walls. The power went out. In the dark she froze, panic rising too fast for her to hide. The rancher noticed immediately. He spoke calmly, guiding her to sit, lighting a lantern. He did not touch her. He did not crowd her. He just stayed nearby, steady and patient. That night she told him a little about her past. Not details, just enough to explain the fear. He listened without judgment. When she finished, he did not offer advice or comfort words that sounded empty. He only said she was safe here. For the first time she believed him. But safety brought new confusion. With fear fading, feelings began to surface. She struggled with them. She had entered this place believing she had no choices. Now she realized she did. That realization was frightening in a different way. The rancher noticed the change too. He saw how she watched him when she thought he was not looking. He felt something growing in himself as well, something he tried to ignore. He told himself that gratitude could be mistaken for attachment, that kindness could be misunderstood. He reminded himself of the agreement and the power difference between them. One afternoon she confronted him. Her voice was firm, but her hands shook. She said she did not want to feel like she owed him her life. She said she needed to know where she stood. The rancher listened carefully. He admitted his own struggle. He said he never wanted her to feel owned or trapped. He offered her a way out, clear and honest. The debt would remain paid. She could leave whenever she wished. The words surprised her. She had prepared for a different answer. She had prepared for pressure or expectation. Instead, she was given freedom. That night she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about choice. For the first time in a long while, staying or leaving was up to her alone. The rancher sat on the porch, watching the stars, carrying the weight of uncertainty. He had stepped into the situation believing it would be simple. It was not. He realized that lives could change in ways no contract could predict. Part 1 ends with both of them standing at a quiet edge. What began as a deal had become something far more complicated. Neither of them knew what the next step would be, but both understood that nothing would ever return to the way it was before. Morning came slowly to the ranch, carried in by pale light and the sound of animals stirring. The woman woke before the sun, as she had begun to do without realizing it. For the first time in a long while, she did not wake with fear sitting on her chest. Instead, there was a quiet confusion, a sense of standing between two paths without knowing which one to take. She dressed simply and stepped outside. The air was cool and the land stretched wide and open, untouched by the noise she had known all her life. She watched the rancher working in the distance, moving with steady purpose as if the land itself trusted him. He noticed her eventually and gave a small nod, nothing more. No pressure, no demand. Days settled into a rhythm. Breakfast was shared but quiet. Work filled the hours. She helped where she could, sometimes clumsy at first, sometimes surprising herself with how quickly she learned. The rancher never corrected her harshly. When she made mistakes, he showed her how to fix them and then let her try again. That simple patience slowly untangled something inside her. Still, the unspoken agreement hung between them. She felt it every time she sat at the table, every time she used water or slept under the roof he provided. Gratitude and discomfort mixed together until she could not tell them apart. At night, she replayed his words in her mind. You can leave whenever you want. Freedom should have felt light, but instead it felt heavy, like a responsibility she was not used to carrying. People from town began to talk. Supplies were delivered. Neighbors waved. A few looks lingered too long. She felt their curiosity, their judgment, their guesses. The rancher seemed aware of it but did not react. He treated her the same in public as he did in private, with calm respect and distance. That steadiness protected her more than words ever could. One afternoon, a visitor made an unkind comment, careless and loud. The woman stiffened, expecting silence or avoidance. Instead, the rancher spoke clearly and firmly, correcting the tone without raising his voice. The moment passed quickly, but it left a mark. She realized then that respect was not something he claimed. It was something he practiced, even when it cost him comfort. As weeks passed, she began to open up, small stories first, where she grew up, things she used to enjoy, hopes she had stopped admitting even to herself. He listened when she spoke, never rushing her. Sometimes he shared pieces of his own past, carefully chosen, honest but not dramatic. Loss, work, solitude, the reasons he preferred the company of land over people. They learned each other slowly, like two cautious travelers sharing a road without promising to walk it together forever. Meals became easier. Laughter appeared, unexpected and gentle. Silence stopped feeling dangerous, yet the balance was fragile. One evening, after a long day, she found herself overwhelmed by frustration she could not explain. She accused him of treating her like glass, of keeping distance as if she were something fragile that might break. The words surprised them both. They hung in the air, sharp and raw. He did not react defensively. He thought carefully before answering. He said he kept distance because he respected her, because he feared crossing lines that should never be crossed without clear choice. He admitted that it was not easy. That restraint was not the same as lack of feeling. The honesty unsettled her. It meant she could no longer pretend that everything between them was simple. That night, sleep did not come easily for either of them. The next day, she did not avoid him. Instead, she worked harder than usual, trying to ground herself in movement. He noticed her effort but said nothing. By afternoon, the tension softened, replaced by a quiet understanding that some things did not need to be solved immediately. A storm returned one night, smaller than the last but enough to stir old memories. This time she did not freeze. She sat at the table with him, listening to rain strike the roof. They talked until the lantern burned low. There was no dramatic moment, no sudden change. Just two people sharing space honestly. Later, alone in her room, she realized something important. She was no longer counting days. She was no longer measuring how much she owed. She was living. The rancher felt the shift too. He noticed how naturally she fit into the space, how her presence filled the house without overwhelming it. He also noticed his own attachment growing, quiet but strong. He reminded himself again of responsibility, of choice, of the promise he had made not just to her, but to himself. Toward the end of the week, she approached him with a question she had been carrying for days. She asked if she could take on more responsibility, earn her place not because she had to, but because she wanted to contribute. He agreed, grateful for the honesty. The change was small but meaningful. It shifted the balance further toward equality. As the sun set that evening, she stood at the edge of the field, watching light fade into gold. She realized that what frightened her most now was not staying, but caring. Caring meant risk. Caring meant loss was possible again. Behind her, the rancher watched quietly, aware that whatever came next would require courage from both of them. The arrangement that had brought them together was fading, replaced by something undefined and fragile. Part 2 ends with both standing on steadier ground than before but facing deeper questions. What began as obligation had turned into choice, and choice, they both knew, carried its own kind of weight. The days grew warmer and the ranch changed with the season. Grass turned greener, animals grew calmer, and the work shifted from repair to care. With that change came a quiet turning point between the two of them. What had once felt uncertain now felt familiar, and familiarity brought both comfort and fear. The woman noticed it first. She noticed how she no longer hesitated before speaking to him, how she no longer felt the need to watch every word. She noticed how her laughter came easier, how her steps felt lighter. She had not felt this way in years, maybe ever. It frightened her because peace felt temporary, like something that could be taken away at any moment. She tried to remind herself why she came here. She told herself not to forget the beginning, the debt, the agreement, the imbalance. But those thoughts no longer matched the life she was living. He did not act like someone who owned anything about her. He asked. He waited. He respected her choices even when they made things harder. One afternoon, while fixing a broken gate together, their hands brushed by accident. It was brief and harmless, but both felt it. The moment passed quickly, yet it lingered in their thoughts long after the work was done. Neither mentioned it. Neither needed to. That night she sat alone and questioned herself. Was she confusing safety with affection? Was she feeling gratitude and calling it something more? She had been wrong before, trusted before, and paid for it dearly. She promised herself she would not make that mistake again. The rancher had his own struggle. He had lived most of his life believing that distance was protection. He kept his emotions guarded, his routine strict. But now, without trying, he found himself thinking about her during the day. He noticed when she was tired, when she was quiet, when something troubled her. Caring had crept in slowly, unnoticed, until it became impossible to ignore. He reminded himself often of the responsibility he carried. He had power in this situation, whether he wanted it or not. That knowledge kept him careful, sometimes too careful. He feared that even kindness could be misunderstood, that any step forward could be seen as pressure. Tension returned, not from conflict but from restraint. One evening, she finally broke the silence. They were sitting outside, watching the sky darken. She spoke without looking at him. She said she felt like she was standing still while everything inside her was moving. She said she did not want to pretend anymore that nothing had changed. He listened, heart heavy but steady. When she finished, he answered honestly. He said things had changed for him too. He admitted that he cared more than he should have expected, but he also said that care did not give him the right to decide anything for her. That whatever came next had to be chosen freely, without debt, without obligation. Her eyes filled with tears, not from sadness, but from relief. For so long, she had lived in situations where words were twisted and promises meant nothing. His clarity felt like air after being underwater. They agreed to pause, not to pull away but to slow down, to give space to think, to feel, to decide. It was not easy, but it was necessary. The next few days were quieter. They worked separately more often. Conversations stayed practical. The space between them felt heavy, but also respectful. She used the time to think deeply about her life before the ranch and the life she was living now. She realized how much she had grown, how much stronger she felt. That strength did not come from him alone, but from being treated like someone who mattered. The rancher watched her from a distance, unsure if he was doing the right thing. Letting go had always been easier for him than holding on. But this time, letting go felt like loss before it even happened. Then something unexpected occurred. A letter arrived from town, bringing news connected to her past. It was not threatening, but it reopened old wounds. She tried to hide her reaction, but he noticed immediately. That evening, she finally told him more of her story than she ever had before. Not everything, but enough to explain the scars. He listened without interruption, without judgment. When she finished, she waited for pity or advice. Instead, he thanked her for trusting him. He said her past did not define her value. He said survival was not something to be ashamed of. Those words changed something in her. She realized then that what she felt was not confusion. It was respect growing into something deeper. A few days later, she made a decision. She approached him calmly and told him she wanted to settle the debt fully. Not because she planned to leave, but because she wanted whatever came next to be free of that shadow. She wanted to stand on equal ground. The rancher was surprised, then quietly proud. They worked out a plan together, fair and realistic. It was not about numbers anymore. It was about dignity. With that decision, something lifted between them. The tension softened. Smiles returned, genuine and warm. They did not rush into anything. They simply allowed closeness to exist without fear. One evening, as they walked back from the fields, she stopped and looked at him. She said she was staying because she wanted to, not because she had to. She said she did not know what the future would bring, but she wanted the choice to explore it honestly. He nodded, emotion clear in his eyes. He told her that whatever happened, he wanted it to be built on trust, not history. He did not promise forever. He promised honesty. Part 3 ends with a quiet understanding between them. The past no longer controlled the present, but it still mattered. What lay ahead was no longer defined by a deal, but by two people choosing, carefully and bravely, to move forward without pretending that fear did not exist. The decision to settle the debt changed the air around the ranch. It was not loud or dramatic, but it was real. The woman felt lighter, as if a quiet weight she had been carrying on her back had finally been set down. She moved through her days with a new kind of confidence, one that came from knowing she stayed by choice, not because she had no other place to go. The rancher noticed the change immediately. She stood straighter. She spoke more freely. When she laughed, it reached her eyes. He felt proud of her, but that pride was mixed with something else, a fear he did not expect. If she was free now, truly free, then she could also leave. And this time, he would have no reason to stop her. He did not say this out loud. He believed that caring for someone meant allowing them to choose their own path, even if that path led away from you. Still, the thought stayed with him during long workdays and quiet evenings. Around the same time, pressure from outside the ranch began to grow. People in town had noticed her staying there for months. Whispers followed her when she went to the market. Some were curious. Some were unkind. A few tried to give advice she never asked for. They spoke as if they understood her life better than she did. One afternoon, she returned from town quieter than usual. The rancher could sense something was wrong. He waited until evening, until the work was done and the sky softened into deep blue. Then he asked gently if she wanted to talk. At first, she said no. Then, after a long silence, she said yes. She told him how the looks and words from town made her feel small again, like she was being pulled backward into a version of herself she no longer wanted to be. She said that even though she felt stronger, the world did not seem ready to see her that way. He listened carefully. He reminded her that people often fear what they do not understand and judge what they cannot control. He told her that her worth was not decided by anyone standing outside the fence of the ranch. Still, she struggled. That night she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about her past life and the future she could build. The ranch had given her safety, but she wondered if safety alone was enough. She wondered if staying meant hiding, or if leaving meant growing. Over the next few days she became restless. She worked, but her mind was elsewhere. She spent more time walking the land alone, thinking. The rancher gave her space, even though every part of him wanted to ask what she was planning. Finally, she spoke. One morning, as the sun rose slowly over the fields, she told him she needed time away. Not forever, just enough to test herself. She said she needed to know she could stand on her own without leaning on the ranch or on him. She needed to know that if she stayed, it would be because she chose him, not because the ranch felt like a shelter. The words were calm, but they cut deeply. The rancher did not argue. He did not beg. He told her he understood. He said that growth sometimes required distance. He said the ranch would remain open to her, no matter what she decided. They packed quietly. There were no tears, no dramatic promises, just careful movements and shared looks filled with things neither of them could say easily. When she left, the sound of the truck fading down the road felt louder than any storm. The ranch fell into silence again. For the first time in months, the rancher felt truly alone. He returned to his routines, but they felt empty without her presence. Meals were quiet. Even the land seemed still, as if waiting. He questioned himself often. Had he done the right thing by letting her go so easily, or was respect sometimes mistaken for distance? He had always believed in choice, but now he felt the cost of it. Meanwhile, the woman faced the world she thought she was ready for. She stayed in town at first, taking temporary work and reconnecting with people she once knew. Some welcomed her warmly. Others looked at her with curiosity that felt like judgment. Life outside the ranch was louder, faster, and far less forgiving. At first, she felt proud. She was paying her own way, making her own decisions. But as days turned into weeks, exhaustion set in. The world demanded strength constantly without offering much in return. She missed the quiet mornings, the honest work, the way the rancher listened without trying to fix her. One evening after a long day, she caught herself comparing every man she met to him, not in appearance but in character, in patience, in respect. No one else matched. That realization frightened her. She wondered if she had mistaken independence for isolation, if freedom meant walking alone even when companionship was offered honestly. She began to understand that strength did not always mean leaving. Sometimes it meant choosing to stay, fully and openly. At the same time, news reached her from someone in town. The rancher had been offered a business opportunity that could change his life, but it required decisions that would shape his future. Hearing this made her realize something else. Life was moving forward for him too, whether she was there or not. The thought of being left behind hurt more than she expected. After many sleepless nights, she made a decision. She returned to the ranch quietly, unsure of what she would find. When she reached the gate, she stopped, heart pounding. For a moment, she feared she had waited too long. Then she saw him. He was repairing a fence, just as he had been the first day she came. He looked up and froze when he saw her. For a long second, neither moved. She walked toward him slowly and spoke first. She said she had learned what she needed to learn. She said she could survive on her own, but survival was not the same as belonging. She said she wanted a life built together, not apart. He listened, emotion clear in his eyes but controlled. He asked one simple question. Was she choosing this freely? She answered without hesitation. Yes. They did not rush into anything. There were no dramatic embraces or promises. Instead, they stood there, letting the moment settle. What mattered was not speed but certainty. Part 4 ends with the ranch no longer feeling like a shelter or a test, but like a meeting point. Two people had walked separate paths and returned with clearer hearts. What came next would not be based on rescue or obligation, but on shared intention and trust. The morning after she returned to the ranch felt different from any other morning before it. The air was calm but full, as if something important had settled into place. Neither of them spoke much at first. There was no need. They worked side by side, moving carefully, aware that this time, staying meant something deeper than comfort or habit. The woman woke early, as she always had, but now there was no confusion in her heart. She knew why she was here. She knew what she had chosen. As she stepped outside, she felt the ground under her feet with new confidence. This place was no longer a refuge she had borrowed. It was part of a life she was helping to build. The rancher watched her quietly. He noticed the change in her movements, in the way she carried herself. She was not returning as someone unsure. She was returning as someone decided. That realization brought him peace, but also responsibility. If they were moving forward together, it had to be done with care and honesty. Over the next days, they talked more openly than ever before. Not in long speeches, but in steady conversations woven into daily work. They spoke about expectations, about fears, about what they wanted and what they could not promise. Neither of them used big words or dramatic language. They spoke plainly, because plain truth had always mattered most to them. She told him she wanted a partnership, not protection. She wanted to contribute, to share decisions, to stand beside him, not behind him. He told her that was exactly what he wanted too. He said he had no interest in control, only in commitment that grew naturally. The ranch seemed to respond to their clarity. Work flowed smoothly. Evenings felt warmer. Silence, when it came, felt comfortable instead of heavy. They shared meals that lasted longer, conversations that wandered from practical matters to quiet hopes for the future. People in town noticed the change as well. Whispers faded, curiosity softened. When she walked beside him now, she did so with confidence, not apology. Some still judged, but their voices mattered less. What mattered was the life they were shaping day by day. One afternoon, while checking the far fence line, the rancher stopped and looked out across the land. He spoke without turning to her. He said the ranch had always been his responsibility, but he no longer wanted it to be his alone. He said he wanted to build something lasting, something shared. She listened carefully, heart steady. When she answered, her voice did not shake. She said she did not need grand promises. She needed honesty and effort. She said she was willing to choose him every day as long as they kept choosing each other. They stood there for a long moment, wind moving through the grass around them. There was no sudden decision spoken aloud, no dramatic question. But both understood that something had been agreed upon. In the weeks that followed, they planned quietly. Not a celebration meant to impress others, but a commitment that felt true to who they were. They spoke to a few close people. They handled paperwork. They made changes to the ranch that reflected shared ownership and shared vision. The day they committed their lives to each other was simple. No crowd, no noise, just a small gathering, the land stretching wide around them. The words spoken were clear and sincere. Promises of respect, promises of honesty, promises to face hardship together without losing kindness. For the woman, standing there felt like reclaiming something she thought she had lost forever. Not safety, but dignity. Not dependence, but partnership. She was not being chosen because she was rescued. She was being chosen because she was valued. For the rancher, the moment carried deep meaning. He had once believed his life would remain quiet and solitary. He had accepted that path without bitterness. But now he realized that love had found him not through force or need, but through patience and choice. Afterward, life did not suddenly become easy. Work continued. Problems arose. There were disagreements and tired days. But they faced them together, speaking openly, listening carefully. When mistakes were made, they were acknowledged. When fear appeared, it was faced honestly. The ranch became a place not just of work, but of warmth. Laughter became more frequent. Plans extended further into the future. Even difficult memories lost some of their power, softened by new ones built on trust. Sometimes, she would think back to the words spoken at the very beginning, the moment that had set everything in motion, at how trapped she had felt, how small the world had seemed. The memory no longer filled her with shame or anger. Instead, it reminded her how far she had come. The rancher, too, reflected on the path they had taken. He understood now that doing the right thing was rarely simple and often misunderstood. But he also understood that respect, when practiced consistently, could transform even the most uncertain beginnings. Years later, people would sometimes ask about how they met, about the unusual start to their life together. They never shared details. They simply said that two people made a choice again and again to treat each other with dignity. The story does not end with perfection. It ends with commitment, with a quiet ranch, shared work, and a partnership built not on obligation but on freedom. What began as a deal ended as a marriage, not bought or forced, but chosen fully and willingly. And in that choice, both of them found a life stronger and richer than either had imagined alone.